You didn't raise your voice. You didn't explain yourself. You didn't plead for understanding. Instead, you gave them something far more dangerous than anger: silence. The kind of silence that forces a person to face the weight of their own actions without the distraction of your reaction, a silence that said everything you never needed to. They expected shouting, chaos, drama, something loud enough to justify what they did to you, but you didn't give them that satisfaction. You left them to choke on their assumptions, their guilt, their confusion, and that's when they realized the version of you they were dealing with wasn't the one they used to manipulate. Your silence didn't mean weakness. It meant calculation. It meant rebirth. It meant the death of your old self and the arrival of someone they were never prepared to face. A version of you forged through pain, sharpened through understanding, and perfected through distance. People fear the quiet ones, not because they lack emotion, but because they no longer waste it. You stopped bleeding for people who never knew how to heal. Instead, you stitched yourself together in the dark, alone, and became the kind of presence that demands respect without ever asking. Your silence became a mirror, a reflection of the chaos they created. And when they looked into it, they hated what they saw. Not you, themselves. Because for the first time, they couldn't hide behind your forgiveness or your explanations. You walked away with a stillness that shook their world. No dramatic exit, no final monologue, no last chance for closure. Just quiet steps, and a door that closed so softly it echoed in their mind like a sentence they could never erase. The villain they created wasn't born from rage, it was born from clarity. You finally saw everything for what it truly was. And in that realization, something inside you shifted permanently. You weren't their toy, their backup plan, or their emotional punching bag anymore. You learned that arguments are invitations to stay entangled in someone else's chaos. But silence? Silence is a declaration that you've outgrown the entire battlefield. And that scares people more than any scream ever could. Your silence dismantled their ego piece by piece. They wanted you reactive. They needed you emotional. They depended on the old version of you, the one who cared enough to explain, justify, defend. But that person died the second you understood your worth. One day they'll admit it to themselves, if not to anyone else, that the moment you stopped arguing was the moment they lost all control. Because silence is power, and you wielded it like a blade sharpened by betrayal. You didn't walk away as a victim. You walked away as someone who finally embraced the power of detachment. You didn't crumble. You didn't break. You evolved. And evolution always terrifies those who remain stagnant. They couldn't process how someone they thought they had figured out suddenly became unreadable. How you became untouched by their games. How your silence felt heavier than every conversation you ever had with them. In your quietness, you built an empire. You rebuilt your mind, your confidence, your identity. And while they were stuck wondering why you weren't reacting, you were busy becoming someone they would never have access to again. Your silence was discipline. It showed growth. It showed maturity. It showed danger, not the kind that harms others, but the kind that protects your peace with ruthless devotion. They noticed your absence like a wound, not because they loved you deeply, but because they lost the attention, validation, and loyalty you gave so effortlessly. Losing you wasn't painful. Realizing they'd never get that version of you again was. The villain arc wasn't about becoming heartless. It was about becoming selective. It was about choosing yourself over people who chose their ego over you. And nothing screams reborn louder than walking away without looking back. Your silence turned into a legend in their mind. They replayed every moment, every conversation, every sign they ignored. They analyzed you the way people study an unsolved mystery, because that's exactly what you became. The beautiful thing is, you didn't change to spite them. You changed because you finally valued yourself enough to stop tolerating what broke you. and that transformation carried a power that words could never deliver. Your silence left them suspended in uncertainty, and uncertainty is torture for people who crave control. They can't twist your words if you refuse to speak. They can't manipulate your emotions if you refuse to reveal them. Every day they wonder if you think about them. Every day the silence answers for you. And the truth is simple. Your silence wasn't revenge, it was closure. The kind you gave yourself when they failed to provide any. Your rebirth wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. It was deliberate. It was unstoppable. You didn't return fire, you extinguished the connection entirely. And in doing so, you rose from the ashes of their betrayal with a calm that terrified them. They thought they could predict your reactions forever. They thought they knew exactly what to expect. But silence, your silence, was a plot twist they were never prepared for. It changed the entire story. You didn't argue. You didn't justify. You didn't fight for a place in someone else's chaos. You simply reclaimed your throne, not with noise, but with presence. A presence rebuilt, refined, and reborn. Your silence became the boundary they never thought you'd enforce. They were used to you bending, adjusting, compromising your own comfort just to keep the peace. But when you finally embraced stillness, it drew a line so sharp it cut through every illusion they had about their hold on you. And that cut was clean, no mess, no drama, no lingering threads. They couldn't believe the calmness you carried. It wasn't forced. It wasn't cold for the sake of being cold. It was the calmness of someone who finally walked out of the storm. You weren't trying to prove a point. You were simply done entertaining chaos disguised as connection. And that is a type of power they never expected you to possess. When they reached out, hoping to trigger a reaction, you offered the same silence that freed you. They tried guilt, manipulation, nostalgia, anything to break the barrier you built. But silence doesn't crack under pressure. Silence becomes stronger when tested. And every attempt they made only proved one thing. You had grown far beyond their reach. Your silence forced them to sit with every wrong decision they made. You didn't remind them. You didn't expose them. You didn't retaliate. You let their conscience do the work. And a guilty mind can be far more brutal than any revenge you could have planned. The most shocking part for them? You didn't look back. Not once. You didn't check on them, didn't stalk their page, didn't ask mutual friends how they were doing. Nothing. Your silence wasn't just directed at them, it was also directed at every old version of yourself that once begged for scraps of effort. They never thought you'd reach a point where peace mattered more than people. They always assumed they were your priority. They always assumed you'd come running back after every storm. But this time you didn't return, not because you hated them, but because you finally loved yourself enough to walk away for good. What they fear the most now is the truth. You're happier without them. They sense it, they feel it. Your silence carries a kind of freedom they can't understand. You stopped explaining yourself and started living for yourself, and nothing threatens insecure people more than someone who no longer needs them. Your silence became a transformation, a rebirth, a transition from being emotionally available to being emotionally untouchable. You became careful with your access, selective with your energy, ruthless with your peace, and they're left staring at the doorway of your life, realizing it's permanently locked now. They replay every moment because they want to know the exact second you detached. They want to know how you went from pouring your heart out to offering nothing but quiet distance. But the truth is, your silence wasn't sudden, it was the final result of thousands of moments they ignored. They wanted you loud so they could pretend you were the problem. But you stayed quiet, and now they have to face the reality of their own actions without anyone to blame. The silence exposed everything they tried to bury. It was the light shining on every flaw they once hid behind your forgiveness. Your silence became your revenge, not out of malice, but out of evolution. You didn't need to destroy them. They destroyed themselves through the choices they made when they thought you'd always be there. Your silence simply revealed the consequences. Now they see you rising in ways they never imagined. Stronger, sharper, emotionally upgraded. Your silence created a distance so vast they can't bridge it with apologies, guilt trips, or half-hearted attempts. You didn't shut them out, they lost their place. And the more you stayed silent, the more they realized how much you used to give, how much you used to care, how deeply you once showed up for them. Your silence highlighted your value, something they never appreciated until it vanished completely. You didn't stay quiet because you were weak. You stayed quiet because you understood the consequences of letting your real self speak. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was restraint, a level of self-control they mistook for softness. They thought your calm was fear, your patience was hesitation, your quiet was uncertainty. But deep inside you were holding back something far more dangerous than any argument they could have thrown at you. They kept testing you because they believed silence meant they were winning. They didn't know you were measuring every word, weighing every reaction, deciding whether the situation deserved the version of you they wouldn't survive. You weren't ignoring their disrespect, you were analyzing it, understanding it, letting it expose them without needing to lift a single finger. That's the thing about monsters. The real ones don't roar immediately, they wait, they watch, they calculate. And you've always been the type who could destroy someone without raising your voice. But you didn't, because you knew the moment you unleashed what you were truly capable of, the entire dynamic would shift into something they couldn't handle. People forget that the strongest ones don't fight for every insult thrown at them. They choose their battles because they know their impact is permanent. They understood nothing about you when they assumed your silence was weakness. If anything, your quiet was the biggest warning they never recognized. You were protecting them from a version of yourself they've never met, the one that doesn't forgive, doesn't explain, doesn't go back and forth. The version that burns bridges without looking back. That doesn't give second chances. That cuts deep with truth sharper than any blade. You didn't unleash that version, not because you couldn't, but because they weren't worth the fallout. But disrespect accumulates. It piles up, layer after layer, until even the calmest soul turns cold. You absorbed more than they realized, not because you didn't feel it, but because you refused to give them the satisfaction of watching you break. You let them think they had power while secretly stripping them of every bit of it. A controlled monster is still a monster, and that scared you more than it scared them. Because you knew the moment you snapped there would be no sorry, no I didn't mean it, no coming back. They had no idea how close they were to being cut out of your life permanently. They played with fire thinking it was warm, but they didn't understand you are capable of turning into the wildfire that leaves nothing standing. Your silence was your shield. It kept you in control and kept them unaware. They had no idea what you were holding back. They thought your calmness was ignorance, but it was discipline. If you had responded with the fire they provoked, the story would have ended far earlier and far uglier. There is power in not reacting, a power they underestimated, because your silence forced them to reveal who they were. They showed their insecurities, their entitlement, their lack of character, all without you having to expose a thing. You watched them dig their own grave with words they thought would bury you. Every time you stayed quiet, it wasn't because their disrespect didn't sting, it was because you chose to stay aligned with your own values. You knew you were too evolved to argue with people who thrive on chaos. You refused to step into the mud with them because you knew they were too comfortable living in it. You learned that silence can be the sharpest response. It can cut deeper than yelling ever could. It makes them question themselves, question their moves, question why you refused to give them the reaction they wanted. And eventually, your lack of response became the loudest message of all. Your silence didn't protect them from your anger, it protected them from your indifference. Because once you reached the point of not caring, the monster inside you didn't need to roar. It just needed to walk away, leaving them with the weight of their own behavior. People think they want honesty, but they're rarely ready for the raw truth you keep caged inside. You could have torn their ego apart with a single sentence. You could have exposed every flaw they try to hide. But you chose peace, not because they deserved it, but because you deserved better than wasting your energy. You weren't trying to save them from the monster, you were saving yourself from wasting time, dignity, and self-respect on someone who believed disrespecting you was entertainment. Staying silent allowed you to stay aligned with who you are, not who they tried to turn you into. Yet still, there came a moment when you realized silence wasn't enough. When you understood that controlling the monster wasn't the real challenge was choosing when to set yourself free from anyone who made you feel you needed to cage it. When you finally withdrew, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't announced, it wasn't loud. You simply detached, and that detachment hit harder than any reaction ever would. Because people fear silence when they know they earned the storm that never came. They replay your quiet now, trying to decode it. They wonder why you didn't fight, why you didn't argue, why you didn't defend yourself. What they don't realize is that your silence was the closure. It was the end. It was the final straw wrapped in calmness. You outgrew the need to prove your worth. You outgrew the desire to explain yourself. You outgrew the urge to match disrespect with anger. Instead, you let your absence deliver the blow your words never needed to. And that's what terrified them in the end. Not the monster you kept inside, but the realization that they weren't even significant enough to awaken it. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was judgment, sentence, and consequence all wrapped into one. Now they sit with the emptiness they created, realizing that you didn't hold back because you were scared, you held back because they were insignificant to the version of you that knows its own power. They expected to break you. Instead, they revealed themselves. And the monster inside you? It didn't need to attack. It just needed to walk away. They never understood that silence is a language, one far more dangerous than anger. When you finally stopped reacting, they didn't feel relief, they felt fear. Because a quiet person isn't a defeated person. A quiet person is someone who has already made a decision. Your silence told them everything they needed to know. You were done entertaining what drained you, done absorbing disrespect, done pretending you didn't see their true colors. The shift in you was subtle but lethal. You didn't announce your boundaries, you enforced them. You didn't explain your exit, you executed it. You didn't announce your pain, you healed privately. And in that silence, they realized you were never the fragile soul they thought you were. You were a storm disguised as a breeze, a threat disguised as peace. They look back now and wonder when things changed. But the truth is, things changed the moment you realized disrespect didn't deserve a reaction. You realized your energy was too powerful to waste on anyone who couldn't value it. You realized you could end chapters without confrontation, without noise, without theatrics. Just silence and doors that would never open again. Silence made them see what they refused to acknowledge. That you weren't emotionally dependent on them, you weren't desperate for validation, and you weren't trapped in their chaos. You were watching them expose themselves piece by piece. You were learning their patterns, their intentions, their manipulations, and preparing to walk away long before they noticed the distance growing. When the disrespect kept coming, you didn't break, you didn't crumble, you evolved. You grew colder, wiser, sharper. You turned every wound into a warning, every disappointment into detachment. Your silence wasn't avoidance, it was transformation. It was the moment you shifted from trying to be understood to refusing to be disrespected. They expected a meltdown when you finally stood up for yourself. Instead, you gave them indifference, a weapon more brutal than any argument. Indifference freezes what anger burns. It leaves people confused, restless, haunted. They didn't expect you to reach that level of emotional clarity where you could shut a door and never look back. Your silence forced them to confront themselves, something they never wanted to do. Because once you stopped reacting, they could no longer blame you, distract themselves with drama, or control the narrative. They had to sit with their own actions, their own lies, their own decay. And that silence echoed louder than any truth you could have spoken. You created distance they never imagined you were capable of. They didn't know the silent version of you, the version that stopped explaining and started erasing. When you detach deeply. And once you're gone, you don't leave breadcrumbs, hints, or openings, just the memory of someone they should have treated better. The monster inside you wasn't rage, it was discipline. The ability to stand still when provoked, the strength to stay silent when disrespected, the wisdom to know that your reaction could destroy someone, and the maturity to choose peace instead. They mistook that restraint for softness because they had never seen true strength before. They're shocked, not mildly surprised, not curious, shocked in the way people are when something they relied on disappears without warning. Because the version of you they knew, the one who cared, explained, tried, tolerated, adjusted, that version didn't just change, it vanished. And in its place stands something they don't know how to approach, negotiate with, or manipulate. This IDGAF-IDJAD version of you doesn't ask for permission to exist. It doesn't wait to be understood. It doesn't bend for comfort. And that rattles them more than anger ever could. They were prepared for backlash. They were prepared for tears. They were prepared for rage, confrontation, long messages, dramatic exits, emotional bargaining. What they weren't prepared for was indifference. Indifference doesn't follow the rules they know. It doesn't play fair. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up one day, calm and unmoved, and makes everything they once had access to irrelevant. They keep asking what happened to you, as if something broke, as if something snapped, as if this version is damage instead of design. They want to believe you're pretending, that this is a phase, that you'll soften again once the dust settles. But the truth they're slowly choking on is far more unsettling. Nothing broke. You woke up. The IDGAD version of you didn't come from bitterness. It came from clarity, from watching patterns repeat, from noticing how often your empathy was used as leverage, from realizing how much energy you spent maintaining connections that only survived because you carried them. This version of you isn't loud because it doesn't need to be. It isn't reactive because it already decided. That's why they're shocked. Because shock happens when expectations collapse. They expected you to chase. You didn't. They expected you to explain. You didn't. They expected you to feel guilty. You didn't. You didn't even look back long enough to give them the closure they felt entitled to. They don't understand how you flipped the switch so cleanly. What they don't see is that the switch flipped a long time ago, quietly, internally, piece by piece. By the time they noticed the IDGAD version of you, the decision had already been made. The emotional exit happened long before the physical or social one. That's what makes it terrifying to them. There was no countdown, no warning they respected, no dramatic signal they could intercept. You simply stopped caring in a way that was irreversible. They used to rely on your reactions, your explanations, your emotional transparency. It gave them power, it gave them information, it gave them influence. This new version gives them nothing. No access, no feedback, no leverage. They talk, and it feels like their words fall into a void. They try harder at first. Louder opinions, sharper comments, subtle jabs, nostalgic reminders, guilt-laced memories. They throw everything at you to see what sticks. Nothing does. And when nothing sticks, panic sets in. Because people who thrive on control cannot handle being irrelevant. The IDGAD version of you isn't cruel. It's precise. It knows where to invest energy and where not to. It doesn't waste emotion on people committed to misunderstanding it. It doesn't argue with narratives it didn't create. It doesn't chase clarity from those who benefit from confusion. That restraint looks dangerous to people who relied on your emotional availability. They start calling you cold, arrogant, changed, heartless. These labels are comfort blankets. They soften the blow of realizing they lost influence over you. If you're cold, then they don't have to admit you're clear. If you're arrogant, then they don't have to admit you've outgrown them. If you're changed, then they don't have to examine their own behavior. But deep down, they know what really changed. You stopped negotiating your worth. The IDGAD version of you doesn't explain boundaries. It enforces them through distance. It doesn't announce exits. It leaves quietly. It doesn't prove loyalty. It chooses alignment. And alignment doesn't beg. They're shocked because this version of you doesn't need to be liked. Needing to be liked made you accessible. Not needing it makes you untouchable. When someone stops seeking approval, they become unpredictable in the best way, and unpredictable people scare those who depend on control. They try to bait you into emotional engagement because emotional engagement would mean they still matter. You don't give it to them, not out of spite, but because you genuinely don't feel it anymore. That's the part they can't process. They keep assuming there must be hidden anger beneath the calm. They don't understand that anger was processed and released long ago. This version of you doesn't hold grudges. It holds standards. They're shocked because you don't explain your silence. You let silence speak for itself. Silence doesn't negotiate. Silence doesn't clarify. Silence simply confirms that the decision is final. They feel small around you now, even if you say nothing. Not because you dominate the room, but because you don't need it. Power that doesn't seek attention makes insecure people uncomfortable. They don't know how to act around someone who isn't trying to impress, convince, or win. You don't compete anymore. You don't compare. You don't chase validation. That alone dismantles half the social games people rely on. They notice it in the way you respond, shorter, calmer, neutral. They notice it in the way you don't overshare anymore. They notice it in how you leave conversations without wrapping them in politeness. You're not rude. You're done. Done explaining. Done fixing. Done absorbing chaos that isn't yours. That finality feels like rejection to people who expected infinite access. They keep saying, "That's not like you," not realizing it's the most honest you've ever been. The old version was survival. This version is choice. The IDGAD version of you doesn't flinch when misunderstood. Misunderstanding used to hurt because you cared about being seen correctly. Now you care about being aligned internally. Alignment matters more than perception. They're shocked because you don't correct lies anymore. You let people believe whatever story helps them cope. Truth doesn't need defending when you've already moved on. They try to pull you back with familiarity, inside jokes, shared memories, history. They don't realize nostalgia doesn't override disrespect, history doesn't outweigh patterns, and shared time doesn't excuse repeated behavior. This version of you understands something they don't. Staying too long is sometimes the real betrayal. They expected your goodness to be permanent. They didn't realize goodness without boundaries turns into self-abandonment. And you stopped abandoning yourself. That's when the shock turned into fear. Because people who lose access to someone calm, clear, and detached realize something important. They can't influence the outcome anymore. There's no lever left to pull. They don't get closure, because closure would imply negotiation. Your absence is the closure. They're shocked because you don't seek revenge. Revenge would mean emotional investment. You don't have it. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you finished. The GAD version of you isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce growth. It doesn't perform healing. It just lives differently, quieter, cleaner, more intentional. They see you happier, lighter, unaffected, and that's when it really hits. Not only did you leave, but you're thriving without the chaos they brought. That's the ego fracture they can't repair. They thought you needed them to feel whole. Now they see you whole without them. They don't know how to reconcile that. They keep waiting for you to break, to miss them, to reach out, to soften. But what they don't understand is that missing someone doesn't mean returning to a dynamic that cost you your peace. The IDGAD version of you knows the difference between love and attachment, between loyalty and self-erasure, between patience and tolerance of disrespect. That knowledge changes everything. They're shocked because you don't argue for space, you take it. You don't demand respect, you require it by removing yourself when it's absent. You don't threaten to leave, you leave. That's why this version of you feels dangerous to them. Not because you're cruel, but because you're unmovable. You don't need the last word. You don't need to be right. You don't need validation. You need peace. And you chose it. They'll talk about you, they'll speculate, they'll rewrite the story to protect their ego. Let them. The IDGAD version of you doesn't police narratives. It lives its life. And that's the final shock they'll never get over. You didn't become colder. You became clearer. You didn't stop caring. You stopped sacrificing yourself. And once someone reaches that place, there's no going back. Because this version of you isn't a phase. It's an arrival. Ah, now they want to start over? Now they want a clean slate? A fresh chapter? A second chance? Hey, now that you don't give a single damn atom of a shit? Hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. You see, they didn't want a new beginning. They wanted a reset button. A magical little switch that would erase their guilt, their disrespect, their hypocrisy. Not because they love you. No. That would be far too human. They want to start again. Because the game doesn't work without you. Their ego doesn't function without your attention. Their identity collapses without your forgiveness. But the joke, oh, the delicious joke, is that you finally stopped caring. And nothing terrifies people like a heart they no longer control. They expected you to crawl back. They expected you to crack. They expected you to stay soft, predictable, loyal, even after they spit on you. But you evolved. You became something else. You're not angry anymore. You're not hurt. You're not even disappointed. You're just done. Cold, unreachable, laughing at the wreckage behind you like it's a comedy show. And that, my friend, is what kills them. Because how do you rebuild something when the person you destroyed has already rebuilt themselves? Without you, how do you restart a story? When the protagonist has walked out of the movie, they thought they'd hit restart. But the controller is dead, the screen is black, and you're already outside the theater, lighting a cigarette, smirking at the ashes of a plot you outgrew. They want to start over. But you don't even want the sequel. You've switched genres, changed universes, rewritten your script, and they're still begging for the opening scene while you're living the finale. So let them talk. Let them apologize. Let them cry, plead, bargain, rewrite history. You're the Joker now. You don't want their order. You don't want their peace. You don't want their new beginning. You already burned the bridge, walked away from the smoke, and left them standing in the ruins of the story they ruined. They want to start again. You don't give a shit. And that is the punchline. You know what really drives them insane? It's not that you left. It's that you left quietly. No goodbye speech. No dramatic exit. No final explosion. Just silence. A silence so sharp it cut deeper than any argument ever could. Because they planned for your anger. They rehearsed for your meltdown. They expected fireworks. Chaos. A scene. They didn't expect your indifference. And indifference, my friend, is the most painful form of revenge ever invented. Now they wander around their own guilt, like lunatics pacing a padded cell, replaying every word they said, every disrespect they threw, wondering which one finally shoved you into the shadows. They created the monster, but they forgot monsters don't explain. And now they approach your absence, like a ghost story whispered in the dark. They've never been this afraid of someone who isn't even there. Because how do you fight? A silence that refuses to answer? They want to start over because they finally realize you weren't just another character in their script. You were the entire plot twist. The only one with a spine. The only one with a soul. And now that you're gone, their story falls apart like wet paper. You see, they don't miss you. They miss the control. Your warmth. Your forgiveness. Your softness that made their cruelty feel safe. But you're not serving that softness anymore. You retired it. Instead, you carry a grin now. A knowing grin. The grin of someone who survived the fire and walked away while the arsonists begged for help. A grin that says, I know exactly who you are, and I'll never let you close enough to prove it again. They want to start fresh because the old version of you was too easy to manipulate, too loyal, too patient, too forgiving. Now you're none of those things. You're unpredictable. You're unbothered. You're untouchable. And that terrifies them more than any anger ever could. Because anger is human. Anger means you still care. But that apathy, that silent, icy calm, that's villain territory. And they know it. They keep imagining scenarios where you give them another chance, another conversation, another opening. But you don't. You're too busy living, too busy winning, too busy building a world where they no longer exist. That's the funny part. They thought leaving you broken would keep them powerful, but leaving them irrelevant made you powerful. They thought you'd return eventually. They counted on it, demanded it, believed in it like religion. But when you don't return, their whole belief system collapses. Suddenly they're praying to a god that stopped listening. And oh, the panic that sets in when they realize you're not waiting in the background anymore. You're not checking their updates. You're not hovering near their life. You're not orbiting their world. You left their galaxy entirely. Now they call your detachment cruel. They call your silence cold. They call your peace heartless. Isn't it funny? They branded you the villain, but now they cry because you finally started acting like one. What fascinates me most is how they pretend not to understand what happened, as if the universe just glitched, as if your disappearance was some cosmic accident. They don't dare admit the truth. You left because they gave you nothing worth staying for, and now they wander through their days pretending they're confused, when deep down, every memory stings like a needle dipped in regret. They keep asking themselves one question over and over. Why aren't you coming back? But the answer is simple, because you finally remembered who you were. Before they dimmed your light, before they twisted your kindness, before they drained you dry with their selfish little games. Once you returned to yourself, returning to them became impossible. You see, you didn't abandon them. You simply outgrew them. Like a snake shedding its skin, you slipped out of the role they forced you to play. And now they're standing there, staring at the empty shell you left behind, wondering how they could have mistaken it for you. Ah, tragic, but deliciously poetic. What really shakes them to their core is how gracefully you vanished. No rage, no war, no revenge, just a villain's smile and the quiet footsteps of someone who finally learned their worth. They expected a storm. You gave them a sunrise. And somehow, that hurts them more. They thought your love was a weakness, They thought your loyalty was foolish. They thought your softness was something they could exploit forever. But when you withdrew it, when your heart went cold, they realized it was their only source of warmth. Now they chase shadows, trying to find a version of you they'll never touch again. And the funniest part? They swear they've changed. They swear they understand now. They swear they'd treat you better if they just had one more chance. But people don't change that quickly. People only panic. And their panic is loud, messy, and absolutely pathetic. A symphony of regret that only confirms you made the right decision. Their desperation now masquerades as nostalgia. They romanticize what they destroyed, rewrite history to make themselves look innocent, and imagine you sitting somewhere missing them. But you're not. You're not longing. You're not hurting. You're not even thinking about them. And that reality hits them like a knife to the gut each morning. They wanted to be the ones who got away. They wanted to be the heartbreak you chased. They wanted to be the unforgettable chapter. Instead, they became the lesson, just a reminder in your mind of how far you've come and how deeply you refuse to sink again. They're not the ones who escaped. You are. Your silence became the monument they stare at in awe and terror. Your absence became the punishment they never prepared for. Your indifference became the chain they can't break. And now every step you take away from them echoes like a verdict they can't appeal. In the courtroom of karma, your peace is the sentence they earned. So here's the final joke, the grand conclusion. They wanted you to hurt. They wanted you to chase. They wanted you to drown in regret. Instead, you rose. You healed. You evolved. And now they sit in the ruins of their own arrogance, crying over someone who no longer feels a single thing for them. They wanted a new beginning. You gave them an ending. And that, my friend, is the perfect villain's punchline.